Broadcasting from 106.7 WIZN Studios, 106.7 WIZN proud to be part of Brewview, Vermont, and this podcast. Well, Elise, welcome to Brewview, the podcast. Very happy to have you join us today to talk about, a place where I think I had my first craft beer, actually, on tap, right? Vermont Pub and Brewery. And
oh, wow.
Yeah. I mean, I had a macro brew as my official first beer, not going to lie. But
Fair.
it was put in my hands and the rest is history. But very happy that I've actually had a lot of my craft beer experiences started out at places like Vermont Pub and Brewery. And it seems, we might as well get started, if you don't mind, in the history. I mean, obviously, you can't have a conversation in Vermont about brewing without Greg Noonan slipping into that conversation somewhere. So you must have a bit of a different, aspect of who Greg is and how Vermont Pub and Brewery started than, I, as a person who's kind of outside of that, would have.
I do. So it's interesting that you say that about your first craft brew was here at Vermont Pub and Brewery, because I have a similar experience, actually. I started coming here the day after I turned 21, and I was addicted to the forbidden fruit raspberry sour mash. And I kept coming in for years, and about 5 years later, I was working at another restaurant and it burned down, and Vicky, who was the bartender at the time, who was one of the full-time bartenders at the time, said, well, you should just work here. And I said, okay. So I was interviewed by Greg and Steve, and I started working here 12 years ago. And so much of my first craft brew experience was here, actually. And I'm happy to still be here. So
yeah, I mean, from a waitress who's kind of like, okay, sure, and now you're the general manager, and Greg actually brought you on board. That's pretty cool, gotta say.
Yeah, it is pretty cool. And I had, to be fair, I had no idea what I was getting into when I started working here, and when I started drinking the beer here. And I of course moved on from the forbidden fruit, which I still love to this day. I still think it's my all-time favorite beer, but I was exposed to a lot of other styles that I had no idea about before coming here. So
yeah, I think it's actually one of the nice things. I remember I went there. I had, I want to say it was Grand Slam. An IPA, which at the time, it's like a West Coast IPA, not like the IPAs that you typically have now, but a fantastic beer. And my girlfriend at the time was like, I don't like beer. And she came in, I ordered a forbidden fruit. I was like, here, taste some of this. And she wouldn't give it back. So
yep. Sounds about right. I like to call it the gateway beer.
It absolutely is. It's so smooth. It's got that fruitiness, it's got that little bit of sourness. So it's kind of, interesting, but it's also at the time, same time, not too much like some of those, sour beers out there. For me, it's like, it's a little fatiguing. There's a lot going on there, but I love the fact that, seasonally I could go in there, I could get like a Hanson Mix Irish Stout, and, I could wait for the summer beers to come along. And then there's, the ones you guys seem to have no matter when I go in there. Is that a plan? Is that just something that kind of happened, or?
No, we absolutely have beers that will never come off of our menu. They have to stay on the menu all the time. And it's because that's what the people want. And right. We're happy to have those landmark beers for us. One of them being our flagship beer, the Burley Irish Ale, which has been in production for over 30 years. And then there are some seasonal beers, like, for instance, you had mentioned the Grand Slam Home Run, formerly known as the baseball beer.
Yeah, the baseball beer, yeah.
That was the summer version, and then the winter version is the Silk Ale. And they're very similar but slightly different, and those stay on the menu pretty much year-round, whether it's one or the other. We generally have the stout on the menu, the Hanson Mix Irish Stout, and the forbidden fruit, of course, can't leave the menu.
Yeah, no,
So,
it's such a fantastic, like you said, it is that gateway beer for a lot of people who are like, no, 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 I don't like craft beer. And then I find actually you guys have a lot of exceptions where it's like people who are just like, no, no, I don't like craft beers, I like pilsners or something like that. And I go, well, here, try this. No, and
exactly. Yeah.
it ends up being one after another after that, and they go, I kind of like this place. Um,
Yeah.
Obviously, can't talk about that without talking about how you guys started. I mean, there's this rumor, or maybe it's true, of how you guys started using a mixture of like agricultural equipment, commercial kitchen equipment, and Greg kind of Frankensteining it all together to make something out of it.
That is very true.
I love
That
that.
is the truth, absolutely. So to start with, home brewing was popular but not legal at the time.
Right.
It was legal at the time that we opened, but Greg had been home brewing for a number of years before it became officially legal.
Hmm.
And when he opened Vermont Pub and Brewery in 1988, there was not really a whole lot of brewing equipment that was small scale brewing equipment that was available to be purchased. So he did essentially Frankenstein pieces together. There was an old pig feeder, I believe, an old ice cream tank, and yeah.
I
And
love
we
that. I
still
love the
have a
ingenuity.
lot of that original equipment. Yeah.
Nice. Someday it'll be in the Smithsonian or something, I'm sure, once they pry it from your hands. But
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
I actually, funny enough, I ended up homebrewing as a result of being pushed into it by a guy who had formerly brewed there, not a head brewer or anything like that, but he'd brewed there for a couple of years and really liked it. And he and I started talking about styles. I thought it was this thing that was very difficult to do. It turns out it's just something that once you start, you can't stop. Takes 3-4 hours, and you invest that time, and you hang out with a buddy, and there you go. And all of
Yeah.
a sudden, I became a home brewer, and it
That's
makes me
great. And you're
appreciate.
still a home brewer?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. It makes me
Nice.
appreciate what goes on. Yeah, it's one of those things where I feel like the more I know about the process on my end, the more I can really appreciate what it is that I am drinking. And I don't ever want to be like a cicerone. I'm not, I don't have aspirations like that, or I don't think the palate for it. But I enjoy beer, and anything that I can do to enjoy beer and help other people enjoy beer, I think is a good thing, which is why homebrewing still very important to me, um, because it just makes me appreciate what's going on. You know.
Yeah. Yep. I
So
totally agree.
so
The deeper I get into this, the more appreciation I have for it.
yeah, you must have seen a lot of things behind the scenes. Do you ever get roped in? Do they like rope people in sometimes to be like, just hold this and stir, or dump this in for me while I stir, or any of those kinds of things?
Um, Not necessarily on that level, but definitely in the way of hauling malt or doing those kind of manual labor activities.
I know about those. Yeah, I know.
Yep.
Yeah, I bought 250 pounds of grain not too long ago, and carrying that's a task, that's for sure. And
Yeah.
that's probably small change compared to what you guys have. So,
Yes,
um,
I think Scott was actually just saying our last malt delivery was something like over 20,000 pounds of malt that was hauled by 3 people,
wow.
which I'm sure is nothing in comparison to the larger breweries around,
Yeah,
but hauled by 3 people, it's pretty impressive.
yeah. I'm sure the macro brewers are saying like hauling. Wait,
Yeah.
they have systems
Yep.
that handle all of that, which is good, because I love the sweat equity of craft beer, and especially here in Vermont. I mean, where some of the things they're literally grown down the road and roasted down the road, and then other things, because of specialty, you have to get it somewhere else. But it's I love that there is the ability to do that when you can. Um, I wanted to ask you a little bit too about the food. I mean, did Greg plan all the food? Did somebody else start planning the food at Vermont Pub and Brewery, in that kind of history of how things started?
So I don't have a vast knowledge of that. I can say that he did plan a lot of the food.
Hmm.
Most of our traditional brew pub, the Vermont Pub and Brewery classics, are original Greg recipes. We still our Vermont cheese sampler, which features 6 different Vermont cheeses.
Mm-hmm.
We actually have a laminated picture of his original vision for that plate, and I'm sure that there are more like that. And I haven't necessarily seen them, but
Mm-hmm.
I've seen notes and I've read, all of our kitchen logs and whatnot. And I know that he was very, very much involved with the food menu in the beginning.
Nice. I mean, not something I even anticipated, but I just started thinking about the foods that I've ordered over the years, and it's definitely the two go very well together. And I don't know if it's by happenstance or so. The good thing is that there is food. It goes well with a beer, and so you can
Yeah,
enjoy
exactly.
everything there.
And knowing Greg, it was intentional.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm sure it was intentional. And a lot of, some of the things are very much British brew pub oriented, maybe not the same as what you would have in Britain, but along the same lines, with the chicken pot pie, formerly known as the kakaliki pie, and
Right.
and the shepherd's pie, fish and chips, all of those items are pretty standard British brew pub food,
Yeah, and I like the fact that you guys have things like, what is it, the toad in the hole,
Yeah.
some other things that kind of stray from that, which I think also again opens it up for other people to go in there, where you have, mushroom-based meal, which I don't remember at the time when I was eating anybody else having, that kind of a thing. And my vegetarian friends I remember used to go in there and eat that a lot. So
Yeah. Yep.
fantastic thing. So now the music thing too, I remember just over the years seeing so many bands there. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, when you go down the stairs to the, to the bathrooms, there used to be bands playing there. Now there's bands playing outside. I find a lot on the stage. Was that part of the, kind of original plan too, or is it, just kind of music goes so well with beers, you guys had to bring them in?
I'm sure that it was probably a little bit of both. That's something that I'm not really sure about the whole history behind that.
Mm-hmm.
The stage time, the inside stage was a little before my time.
Yeah.
Because for as long as I can remember, and just to put a year on it, I believe I started coming in 2003.
Mm-hmm.
So in any case,
yeah, that was way
today,
early on. So I mean, probably I have one of those weird memories where I remember weird details. So I find a lot of people probably don't even know that used to happen in there. And then they had seating there for a while, and now it's the part of the equipment that's there. So
yes, and that is for the tanks on the stage, or what used to be the stage, are specifically for the Tulalese Flanders style red ale.
Mm-hmm.
And because we use Brettanomyces, so we keep those tanks very separate so that wild yeast strain can't really contaminate anything else.
I love that. Smart, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I actually, when I was looking for pictures for this article, I actually came across the pictures of moving the tanks onto the stage and having to remove the window. And that kind of put a year on it, because I saw the people who were in the picture, and that actually probably didn't happen much later than when I started coming here, because the people who were in those pictures were here working here when I first started working here myself.
Oh, wow.
So,
yeah.
So I don't remember ever seeing bands on that stage, but I know not just you, but a lot of people talk about it. We have a lot of longstanding regular customers who have been coming in here since day one or shortly thereafter. And they share stories with me all the time. And I'm not really sure why they decided to stop doing music inside. But in all fairness, the outside stage works great. It's really nice to draw people in from the street. It happens all the time. We had music last night, and we're continually kind of revamping our music scene and changing the hours. Now we've got music mainly through dinner time in the summer, on Thursday nights and select weekends, depending on what's going on in town. And I know that music used to be later as more of like a late night sort of scene.
Mm-hmm.
And we've just kind of changed that over the years with what people suggest and what people want. And so
I have to
we're
actually admit
happy
that
that we're still doing music.
I love the earlier bands. I'm a dad, and so when I can go and I can see a band, but I can still be home to like say goodnight to my kids. Like to me, it's like the best of both
Right.
worlds.
Yeah.
Because I know
Yep.
some of the bands who play there occasionally, and so I try to still go and support. And of course, I'll have a beer, maybe some food while I'm there, as I do,
Nice.
which is of course the whole point of my existence. I think really. So
Mine too, I think.
yeah, it's really I think it's a good one. So now I know that Scott was I was hoping that we might be able to talk to your head brewer, but as things are, he's probably in the middle of brewing. So if he doesn't have the opportunity to talk, that's okay. But I'm hoping that would be great if he does. But what if you can tell me? I mean, we're kind of talking a little bit about the history, talked a little bit about kind of what's going on now. Are there any other kind of like plans of what is kind of around the corner or off in the future? You guys plan on pretty much staying the course, reacting to what's happening in the beer world? Any insight on that?
Yeah, well, it's always a struggle between keeping our rich heritage alive and staying current with the times,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that we're doing a pretty good job of keeping up, but at the same time honoring that heritage.
Mm-hmm.
We do participate in as many collaborations as we can. Currently, we're working on a collaboration with Hermit Thrush Brewery to make our burley Irish ale into a sour.
Oh.
And they'll have it in cans. It'll be available in cans. We're not sure when just yet, but the process has already started. It's aging at their brewery right now.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, and it's really exciting. It's especially exciting because we don't can or bottle anything, so you have to actually come in here to get our beer. So it'll be really cool to have some of our beer in stores in a way.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I mean, that'll be the first
yeah,
time that I remember seeing, something out there. I mean, I've asked.
yeah,
I've
yeah,
asked, but
and
I love the fact that, you guys for a while I know did some take home stuff. Is that still something that happens at all there or because I know the laws on that are weird, so.
we offer growlers to go.
You do. Okay, still.
Yep. We still offer growlers to go, and those are filled to order. We offer almost everything that we have available on tap, except for the Handsome Mix Irish Stout, which is on nitro pour, so it just doesn't
Yeah.
translate well to a growler.
No, it
But
doesn't work unless you have nitro at home and recharge it or
yeah,
something.
yeah, exactly. So that's the only one that we don't really offer. But yeah, we definitely we don't can or bottle, and we have no real visions of that in the future. It's been
Mhm.
talked about, but we're not saying one way or another that we will or won't, but it's not in the immediate future. I can say that much.
Right.
So it is kind of cool though, because you have to actually make the pilgrimage here to try our beer.
And and I think there are people who really do. I mean, especially knowing the history. I know that obviously one of the ways that I found out about the Frankensteining was reading the book the Queen City history of brewing in Burlington, and talking to Jeff and Adam, and they're talking about the Frankensteining of things that Greg did, and being in books like that. Do you find that is finding you new people, or is it just kind of the fact that they go, hey, Vermont beer, obviously they come to Burlington because it's the place where the airport is, and then and they make that pilgrimage, or are they finding out about you in other ways, or is it just kind of mishmash? Do you guys get any info feedback from folks on that?
So it's funny that you bring that up, because it was actually just a couple days ago, I was bartending and someone actually had the book in his hand, the Burlington Brewing, A History of Craft Beer in the Queen City,
Thank you.
just to say the full name there. And he actually had the book in his hand, bookmarked, and he had it open to our page. And he said that he came in specifically because he read about us in this book.
Awesome.
So it, who knows how many people that just happened to be very recent and the most evident. I mean, there's no more evident that you can be having the book in your hand, carrying it into the bar. So
Yep, that makes it pretty clear.
Yeah, yep. So that was really cool. And I believe that there are probably many other people who read about our history or already knew about our history, in all fairness. One of the things that Scott says is, you're hard pressed to find a brewer over 30 years old who has no idea who Greg Noonan is. So
it's very true. Yeah. And honestly, I
yeah.
love the fact that this book has come out, and it'll, hopefully reach new people who are, who are interested in this. And, I've involved with the, beer community on Twitter and places like that. And I still, I see his name come from the most unexpected of places, where you'd be like, how in the world do you know who Greg Noonan is? But they do. And, and his name still gets spread around as, just one of those people who really laid the groundwork for what craft beer is today, especially here in Vermont, where, like you're saying, it was illegal until he and, petitioned the state to change those laws, and, made it possible for, gosh, so many other breweries to exist because of that, and teaching people how to brew.
Yes. Yep. And he was very community oriented and wanting the beer scene to grow and willing to talk to anyone who wanted to find out anything about brewing or about brew pubs. And I just need to say he lobbied with Bill Mars, who was a state legislature at the time. But in any case, they did a lot of work. It took, I believe, 2 years for them to change the laws, and it was just a series of checks and balances, and Vermont just wanted to make sure that it was that they knew what they were getting into before allowing brew pubs. In 1988, most people didn't even know what a brew pub was. So
no, they really didn't.
Greg did a lot of work to really create this foundation that we have today. And that's one thing that I think we try to impress that upon people. Anyone who comes in, we try to educate our staff on the history, on brewing knowledge as much as you can. We have a lot of long-term staff members, as well as a lot of college students who, will work here through college and then move on. But we're continually educating our staff on not just beer knowledge, but the history of this place. And I think that there's a lot of honor amongst our staff, knowing that they're working at the place that started it all. So
yeah, I mean, there are not a lot of places.
Yeah.
There are not a lot of places where if you say, hey, add 2 years to your business plan before you start, that they would have gone through with it, so that's that, the tenacity, of him to keep pressing forward on that for all that time. That's amazing. And it's great that you guys still honor that tradition and, that hard work with the staff who are there today. I can't thank you enough for doing that, because again, it's people who've worked there who, are made me the craft, brew appreciator and homebrewer that I am today. So.
Nice. Yeah. It's, I know I feel especially honored to be a part of this, even I wasn't here at the very beginning, obviously, but, I've learned a lot, especially in the past couple of years, taking over this position. And there's a lot to learn from Steve Kolowasik, who's Greg's partner and, business partner. And he is just a wealth of knowledge when it comes to all of this. And he's really, he pretty much gives Greg all of the credit, but I think that he needs to take some credit himself because he's really done a nice job about keeping Greg's vision alive without, obviously you have to change with the times to a certain extent, but you still have to keep true to what the original vision was.
Yeah, and you guys, I have to say, have done it so well. The changes that have been made, which most of the time a lot of people wouldn't even notice, but whenever they have, they've been very subtle. They've felt very well thought out, and very much um, didn't affect the experience, I think, of people who are coming in there.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh,
Yeah.
you're welcome. Thank
Um,
you guys. I mean, it's nice. I mean, Vermont Pub and Brewery is kind of one of those places where, in some ways, it's a working museum of the history of brewing in Burlington.
exactly. Exactly. And there are not a lot of microbreweries out there anymore that still brew in the fashion that we do. A lot of things are computerized. Equipment is a lot newer, and Scott has been. I wish that he was here, but he's been here for a number of years. He started out as Russ Fitzpatrick's assistant brewer,
Hmm.
and then Russ had to leave due to some health issues, and Scott just stepped right up, and he's still learning little things here and there that make our brewery really unique, that maybe make his job a little more challenging than it needs to be or than it could be, but he's really stepped up in a way that's very cool, honoring the past and still moving towards the future. So
The amazing thing about brewing beer that I found is that I'm constantly still learning, and it was the early '90s was the first time that I ever did a homebrew. So, so
oh
that's a
wow,
long
yep,
time to be, doing it and still learning how to do things better, still learning new techniques, new experiences, new, equipment that's being created by other brewers. That I find it's always the small scale stuff that, the guy who's brewing on a 15 to 20 gallon system that ends up being created and, works its way up the chain. I don't think that plate chillers and things like that would have existed if it wasn't for the homebrewing community, and you know and they just continue
yeah.
through. So, um, I guess I'm running up against the clock here, so I guess I'll end on one final question, and I sent this to you because I know it's one to think about. But what would you want people, if they've never been to Vermont Pub and Brewery, what would you want them to come to Vermont Pub and Brewery for, and then to leave knowing? If there was one thing that, if you could put that a point on that, what would you say to people?
So it's funny that you bring that up now, because I feel like we've actually been kind of talking about that the whole time. And
Hmm.
it's really just, I think that knowing the history and respecting the history is really the most important thing in my mind. And knowing that Greg Noonan really paved the way, and we were the first brew pub in the state. And it's, I think it's important for people to understand that even though they may not remember that time, many of our current patrons are younger than we are, and
Hmm.
so the beer that they know can be very different, but we kind of started it all, and that's I think that's important to know, and to know just the history behind it. That um, I'm not saying that we wouldn't have had such a craft beer boom that we see right now, but we definitely helped facilitate that. Um, and yeah, I think that's pretty much.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
wholeheartedly agree, and I agree too. I mean, it's like, we kind of talked all around that question the entire time that we were talking, and yeah, it really is amazing, and I think you guys can literally claim that there wouldn't be as much brewing going on in the state of Vermont. I wholeheartedly believe, if it wasn't for Greg, the pushes that he did, starting Vermont Pub and Brewery, showing other people that, hey, you can do this, teaching people how to brew. I mean, there are people I know who it was, they either learned from Greg or they indirectly learned from somebody that Greg taught. And most of the people who I know, it's people with Green Mountain Mashers who, you can't have a meeting with those guys without Greg's name coming up at least a couple of times, or somebody saying Greg Noonan held up this beer in my hands and said, "This is the best beer that I've ever had," in this group and thing.
Yeah.
you know,
Yep.
that was literally, a quote that I heard in one of those meetings. Um,
Yeah.
and,
It's awesome.
history is great, but especially when it's something that, for I think a lot of us, there is a great beer community, but especially here in Vermont, where it's a small state where, we have small borders. We've had strange laws in the past, Greg and others working to change that and making this happen. And you guys, again, at least still teaching the staff there about the history so that they can share that and they can, talk to people intelligently about that. I think that keeps that alive and, absolutely make sure that everybody who's going to go there is going to leave knowing more, hopefully about beer, but maybe about Vermont Pub and Brewery too.
Yeah, exactly. And, we're coming into a whole new generation of brewers and beer enthusiasts who, maybe don't know the history. I actually come across a lot of people who don't know the history. And so it's actually very exciting for me to not just tell customers myself, but also hearing our staff telling people. It gives me a really good feeling about that. And there's no doubt in my mind that, without Greg, we would not be where we are right now in the brewing world, in the beer world in Vermont, and the country for that matter, not just Vermont, but,
really, yeah, true.
Speaking about Vermont and beer tourism, I believe is reaching one of our top revenues for the state. I was talking to Amy and Melissa from the VBA, or they were talking about it, and I believe that beer tourism has topped the ski industry and or perhaps maple syrup. So it's really cool that we've been able to give back to the state in that way, and I know that that's that was all part of Greg's vision also. So
yeah, job well done. I mean, definitely. Yeah. I remember, I think it was last year was when it officially and last year it was a great year for skiing, which was skiing and riding was great last year, but still beer, did more for the state. And, the fact that we have more breweries per capita and so many of them are fantastic. It's hard for me to point at a place and say, I don't think that they're doing a fantastic job. I think that there were a couple, a handful of years ago who somehow were able to do that. And that they have, either improved or they've selected themselves out of the industry. And, so it's great that every place where you go, if you trace back that history, it just seems to go, back again and again and again to kind of that single source of, Greg and his buddies, because, it wasn't, in fairness, it wasn't just Greg, but he was the one who carried that torch, who got everybody together, who, seemed to champion the cause and made it all happen. And it's great that we, still remember so fondly what he did, for so many of us. Well, Elise, we could probably go on talking about this, for hours, I'm sure. But I want to let people, get back to their days. But I thank you so much. I'll let you get back to yours too. I thank you so much for joining us here on Brewview. And this is a companion piece, again, to an article that is in Brewview Vermont magazine. So we'll have some great pictures in there. And you were talking about how one of the pictures was from your 2000th brew. That's got to be, I mean, gosh, what a nice feather in the cap for you guys to have done that so recently.
Yes, that was just last Thursday, actually. And we had most of our former head brewers here with us. And some of the pictures that I sent over, the only person that was missing who was here out of that picture was Glenn Walter, who was our head brewer in '89. And he worked with Greg, and he was actually, he played an integral role in creating the Black IPA style. But in any case, not just to talk about him, he was just missing out of that photo. But we had almost all of our former head brewers here. Jonathan Kuzman flew in from Oregon to be here for the 2000th brew. And just to say what it is, it was the Vermont smoked porter. And we had actually, the first time that we brewed it was actually 30 years ago to the day.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah,
That's
yeah.
great. That's
And,
fantastic. Yeah, smoked porters. Yeah, who else was doing that back then? I don't
yeah,
know
true,
anybody.
true. And there's no smoke extract. We actually smoke all of the malt ourselves. And it's a process, but it was really cool that we were able to do that for our 2000th. That everyone was able to make it in here.
That is great. So have you guys tapped that already yet, or is that just aging right now? Then it's got to be aging.
We'll be tapping it. We will be tapping it in, I believe Scott said, about 2 weeks.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And that will be in the article too. We'll have a release date for it, and hopefully some of the people can come back for that. Obviously, Jonathan from Oregon probably won't be able to, but hopefully some of the other people who are here will be able to make it in for that.
Nice. Well, hopefully I will be able to make it in and have a little taste of that myself. So
sounds good. So
all right,
keep your eyes peeled for a release date.
I definitely will, and I'll share it on social media when we get that in. Elise, thank you so much for joining us and helping to tell the story about Vermont Pub and Brewery, and for all of our fans here at Brewview. Thank you again.
Thank you, Mel.
Join us next time. We are broadcasting from the studios of 106.7 WIZN. The Wizard, proud to be part of Brewview Vermont and this podcast.